Good afternoon and welcome to the Value Economics Show. Happy Monday. On September 8th, 2020, a small-time finance blogger named Morgan Housel published The Psychology of Money. The book would become the best-selling book of the 2020s so far, still ranking in the top 10 of the Amazon charts to this very day. It made Housel a household name and one of the most sought-after thought leaders in the world. But why did this happen? In my opinion, the reason why Housel is such a titan in the modern era is because he is able to convey such deep concepts in very simple manners. His tight packaging and big ideas are a heck of a combination, one that he showcases all the time in everything that he writes. It's a thing of beauty and some of the most effective writing I've ever encountered. There are many ideas from the psychology of money that stand out, many stories that have had profound impact and effect on many people. But for me, the story that most sticks out is the one about statistical tail events. For the non-nerds out there, a tail event in statistics is a plot on the normal distribution that resides 2 standard deviations away from the mean, i.e. it's something so rare that it is considered a statistical anomaly, something that hardly ever happens. When discussing tail events, one would think from first glance that these events don't matter. If they're so rare, one might ask, why would someone even consider them? And it's a logical place to start. However, it's incomplete in its analysis. The greatest accelerant to value is scarcity. When something is rare, that something is automatically and by definition more valuable. This means that tail events and the stories that the statistics of tail events tell are the most valuable pieces of information to know. For example, the reason why most earthquakes don't have names or dates attached to them is because most earthquakes are minor. However, for the most powerful ones, the tail events, they are remembered forever. The same is true with dating app matches and pandemics and targets you aim at in an archery range. Each one tells a story, but some tell more than others. As Housel has iconically put it, tails drive everything. And this begs a question. What tail events drive the most consequence in our lives? Which one are the most relatable, mean the most to us, force us to adapt and change more? Many could fit this category, but in my view, there is one that stands king above the rest. Stories. There is nothing in your life that is more of a tail event than your holistic story, and the smaller stories that form the mosaic of your larger one. Story, as my friend Hafiz Bayoku says, is undefeated. Story, as Jordan Peterson says, is the only way we can comprehend the world together and have a chance at staying together. There is a reason why civilizations have failed, but we still remember their legends. The story that sticks, no matter how trivial the thing that birthed that story may or may not have been. When you observe your own life, this is the constant truth. Most of life for everyone, regardless of who they are, is mundane and boring. Almost nothing happens most of the time. But the few times that life decides to get wild, the times where things go awry in good or bad ways, is when everything changes and your life shifts and all that you think you know blows up in your face and transforms into something new. This deserves a greater analysis than it's gotten from everyone, myself included. Because this matters more than we realize. With all of the advancements in things like AI, the differentiators between humans and technology is growing thin. We don't have much at a functional level that makes us different anymore. Think of it from a fundamental level. What could you ask a human that you couldn't ask ChatGPT or Grok? You'd have to think hard to find anything in that category that's left. But the reality is this: humans are far more than functional. We're human, as it turns out. We need to hone in on what makes us so, and make sure to not have it get lost in the sauce. Stories are perhaps the most human thing on earth. We must make sure to keep that in mind as we progress through life, because if we lose stories, we lose almost everything else that makes us human. The machines will have won. We will be nothing more than simply outdated versions of them. Which is why today's show is going to be dedicated to stories and how they can and should shape your life. In order to understand what makes a good story, we must dig into the various stories themselves. To do so, I've come up with what are, in my view, the 5 most impactful stories to my life, to shaping who I am as a person. Some of these are things I've never talked about publicly, and hopefully by episode's end, I will be able to weave together a narrative that you can model to hopefully tell yourself some things about yourself, to make understanding yourself far easier if you follow a similar path. This is also going to be a very relatable episode, and a very personal one. Other than this monologue, I hardly have any notes. I'm completely shooting from the hip. This is going to be an autopsy of my own stories, one that is hopefully defined by radical self-reflection that will prove valuable as you go onto your own journey of discovering your own stories. If stories are the tales that drive everything important in our lives, we must commit ourselves to telling them. So without further ado, here's mine. So the first story that I want to tell is the story of me growing up with a disabled sister. Now, I have a book coming out about this in a couple of weeks, in part, in some ways, but I think I've never really talked about it a lot in the specific way, just because I view it as something that I don't want to victimize myself while telling it, just because I'm not a victim and my sister's a blessing to me. And regardless of her ability to think critically or regulate her emotions or whatever, I still love my sister. I'll always love my sister. And she's really, really been impactful to me in more ways than I can probably even comprehend. Definitely more ways than I can comprehend, as it turns out. But I think so for context, I'm the oldest of three. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. My sister's the middle child. My brother's the youngest. And my sister's about 14 and a half months younger than I am. She's been autistic basically her entire life. And, like I say in Spectrum of Lies, my book that's coming out, it is a kind of a fashionable thing to be autistic now. People are just kind of doing coming out posts for it on TikTok, like, oh my God, I'm autistic, like, look at me, whatever. My sister has actual autism, so for people who grift onto autism, this is not the same as those folks. But basically, why I think dealing with my sister's disability was so important is because it shaped my perception of everything. It shaped my perception of love, of women, of family, of relationships, of values, of just so many things. Because really, when I was growing up, my sister was the thing that my family oriented themselves around. Just one, out of necessity, and two, because we loved her, and three, just kind of, it was such a big gravitational pull that we had to base a lot of things out of it. For example, we had limits of times we could spend at restaurants. We didn't go to church as often as some other people, just because sitting quietly and without being able to move or do something and listen to a Catholic sermon for 45 minutes and stand up and sit down and kneel and sing and all those things. My sister did not like that. I did not like that. Most people do not really like to do those type of things. And that's not Catholic bashing, but that's just kind of the way that our family worked. And so I think that when I look back oftentimes at growing up in my family dynamic and how different it was from a lot of other people, and I'm not saying that people don't have struggles. I didn't have an alcoholic father, for example. I didn't have a mother that abandoned me. I didn't have, infighting or divorce or a lot of things. And this was just kind of my version of a lot of things that are unfortunately far common in a lot of other stories. Thankfully, my parents loved each other very much, still love each other very much. My family we had problems, but we were basically tight throughout the entire time. But I think I almost just kind of pushed this under the rug. We didn't make really a big deal out of saying that, my sister's autism was, a big thing or whatever and all that sort of thing. But looking back on it, it was a big deal. And it really affected all of us quite a bit. And my sister, obviously, most presciently, but a lot of us, all together as well. And I think what really I took from it, and the biggest impact that it had on me, is that it made me radically independent. And I think that comes from multiple factors. First, I was the oldest, so naturally I've done this, bro science is like oldest child syndrome. I don't even know if that's a thing or not, but to me it is. And so I have, oldest child syndrome because I am the oldest. I'm responsible. I have to organize everything. It kind of still comes out now. When we were at family events or mini golfing or whatever, I still kind of have hey, everyone get in the straight line and do whatever. And I'm not like that anyway. I have OCD, given from that, or I don't know, OCD, whatever. Anyways, like I said, I'm shooting from the hip here. I don't have notes. So I was already kind of type A just from that perspective, but what made me more type A and made me more independent was that I always had to be the okay kid. That's kind of how I put it often, is that, my brother had issues in terms of younger siblings learn from their older siblings. And, my brother being next in line after my sister, with my sister being, disabled and impaired and a bunch of things that rubbed off on him. And so he had some intellectual things and hated school, and a lot of people hate school, which is fine. But, my parents had to spend more time with my brother and sister, and they basically said okay, Sam, just stay here. Don't burn the house down, just stay and do whatever, and we'll get to you eventually. And that I don't blame my parents for that at all, because again, they had to do it. They were kind of they were young parents at the time. They had never had kids. They had 3 kids under the age of 4, I think, at one point. Because 3 kids under the age of 4 at one point. My dad had a demanding job. My mom was running around all over the place. All that sort of thing. My mom's family was kind of a mess for a while as well, and so she had a lot of those things to deal with. So I just kind of had to be separate from everything that my brother and sister had, which kind of gave me a little bit of an expedited childhood, I feel. And to do that, I had to be the person that was dependent on. When my dad was at work or when my mom needed something, they would always go to me first. And my brother and sister didn't really have a lot of the responsibility that I did. They had other things they had to do as well. But it taught me from a pretty early age that I had to stand on my own 2 feet. And I had to, if I wanted something done, I had to go out and get it myself. I had to study by myself. I had to work by myself. I had to go outside. I could not depend on my parents for getting something done for me and aiding me in the way that they aided my brother and my sister. And, baked into that as well is a thing that I developed, was that I didn't want to burden my parents with anything, because I could take some time away from my sister, could take some time away from my brother, so I'm just going to figure it out by myself. And I became very, very, very self-sufficient from a very young age, which in a way is good, but in a way also I think what this period taught me, particularly from my sister's disability, is that there's a limit to independence. There's a limit to self-reliance. There's a limit to self-sufficiency, because what that developed in me was kind of a narcissism complex and a empowerment complex that shouldn't have been there, and a holier than thou complex that has led me into a lot of very sinful behaviors and, things that, I'm very stubborn. It kind of runs in my family. I have a temper that also runs in my family, but I certainly fueled those things with all of the stuff that I have to work on my own 2 feet. And I didn't understand the limits of this up until very late in my life, probably in college or a little bit past college. We'll get to that in a second, but I didn't see that those had limits. I just thought that those were the way that things were. I thought that they were the way that life was going to be for me. If I had to go out, I had to eat what I kill. I had to earn it. And that was why I went into sales. That's why I didn't like group projects. That's why I've started a couple companies now. That's why I don't like authority. That's why I don't trust politicians. That's why I don't trust the government. That's why I don't trust corporations. That's why I don't trust top-down control on everything. I hate being controlled. I hate telling people what to do. I hate being told what to do. I've always had that. I always have kind of an anti-authoritarian streak, which is all a result of this era of my life. And also, I think that, it also kind of fed, I'll maybe end with this, is that I'm very anti-therapy for the most part. Unless you've had like PTSD or you're coming back from the military or you've had a death in the family or something, that's fine. But for people that are using therapy as kind of a Band-Aid for like, I feel sad today, like I don't really have a lot of sympathy for that. But so I've been very anti-therapy, and I've kind of been digging into as of why, because I'm like, maybe I might need therapy. I don't know. I got a lot of issues, as it turns out. But anyways, so I've been wondering why I've been so anti-therapy. And I think a big reason is because I believe, and I firmly believe this still, I'm not backing down on this from 1 inch. I believe that therapy is an inherently anti-family institution. It divides the family, because we see this with the trans youth craziness that we have going on. We see this with a lot of things. They say at the end of the day, you know what, you have childhood trauma, your parents screwed you up, they're bad people, you should not listen to them, so listen to me. Outsource it to a medical complex or a medication or a therapeutic practice or the government or another institution or something, because the family's the problem, your parents screwed you up, and it's not your fault. And I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that, because I don't think that's fair. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you guys couldn't tell by this point. I've been digging into this a lot recently too. Enneagram 8s are obsessed with justice and fairness and making sure justice is served. And I am very much like that. That's why I don't like power or authority or misuse of authority most presciently. And so I said, you're never going to tell me, ever, that my parents are the problem with issues in my life. I will not allow that to be outsourced to my parents. I will not allow that to be something that affects me. But looking back on it, in terms of me being so self-reliant, so independent, what I think is deeper than that in my pushback to therapy, and what is the other side of the coin of this self-reliance is that I feel like a big portion of why I have never gone to therapy for more than like a couple of months. I went a couple of months in college because I was like sad or whatever. But in therapy, I think that what I'm afraid of if I go to therapy is that they would tell me my parents neglected me. And why that scares me is that I don't think that would be wrong. I don't think that's the whole story, but I don't think it's necessarily wrong. And that's been a tough pill to swallow for me for a very, very long time because I do feel that way to a degree. I was very resentful of my parents. I was very resentful of my siblings for this because the reason why I was resentful of my siblings for this is like, well, I mean, shit, man, I got problems too. I got issues too. Like, why aren't you paying attention to me? Why don't you love me? Why don't you do this? And my parents love me, and I don't doubt that at all, but that's how I felt. And I think this really hit home when Arthur Brooks, who's been just a remarkably positive influence in my life in terms of the content that I absorb, he has this thing called the idols test, which was taken by St. Thomas Aquinas, who basically said the 4 main idolatry patterns that people fall into are money, pleasure, power, and either fame or recognition, status. It's kind of like that thing in the back end. And my idol is the last one. It's fame, recognition, status. I want people to see me. I want people to tell me good job. I want people to love me. I want people to affirm me when I do something well. And I think a lot of that stems from the self-sufficiency problem. And I think I didn't get that a lot from my parents. I would bring home A's on papers. I was a pretty smart kid naturally. I studied a little bit, but not a lot. And I would bring home A's all the time, but that was the standard for me. And my brother would bring home like a C on a test, and my parents would be like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm like, if I got a C, like, what the heck? Like, that would be like the apocalypse as far as I was concerned back then. And I now know, as a hopefully more mature person, that you have different standards for different people. For a C, for my brother in certain subjects, he was pretty good. For me, it would be the apocalypse. And so A's were the standard for me and everything else. But again, as shaping my brain and my mentality towards the world, I took offense to that. And I said, well, what the hell? Like, why don't you appreciate what I do? Why don't you appreciate what I bring to the table? All that sort of thing. And that affected me quite a bit. And I think that all stemmed from just my love for my sister and my sister's disability. And I think that it kind of, made me think that the world is out to get me. And I have to do everything I can to just punch and kick and struggle and scrape and claw to just fight it. And I'm a fighter by nature. I always say if someone takes a shot at me, I'm going to hit them back 10 times harder. It's the Vivek Ramaswamy quote. And I believe that, and I do that. Like, if someone comes at me in a sales call, if someone comes at me, like I've gotten into fights with corporate executives about this when I was in the corporate world. I called out a manager that was 5 levels above me once for saying something that I didn't think was true. But I realize that stems from that. And I'm looking to reconcile that now, and I'm coming to terms with a lot of that now, and looking to kind of say, like, okay, how can I get better from this now and not have that as my mentality? But that's how I feel. And it's not anybody's fault because, again, it's just circumstances, and people deal with circumstances a lot differently. And it's not my parents' fault. I don't think it's my fault necessarily all the way. It's not my sister's fault. It's not my brother's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's not God's fault. It's just the way that things are. And I think that was the foundation that shaped everything going afterwards. So my sister's disability and really what led to my self-sufficiency problem is really the first story that really kind of shaped me going forward. My second story that I think is really impactful was, I told this in my first book, Value Economics, it's behind me. I almost failed out of college when I went off to college. So my biggest thing was I knew that I was a very average to below average athlete in high school with everything that I did. I did weightlifting, I did football, and I did track and field. And I was not good at any of them. I was pretty average, or maybe slightly above, maybe slightly below. I was very riding the mean of kind of everybody else, and probably below it in a lot of ways. I wasn't as gifted as a lot of other people, or didn't really care as much as a lot of other people. More frankly, to give my colleagues some credit, because I had some really good athletes that I played with. I had a lot of people that played with D1 football. One of my best friends growing up, Sam Jarek, played and was a Remington Award finalist and two-time captain for Northwestern. He was a great player. Jake Sopko, my quarterback in high school, got a scholarship to Cincinnati. A lot of other people played D1. A lot of people played really high-level D3 at Mount Union, which is by me. It's the number one D3 football school in the country. But I just wasn't. I knew my future wasn't in athletics, and I think I could have entertained maybe a D3 football thing or a D3 track thing, maybe, and even that's a stretch. But I never really bought into that. Athletics was never, and I really didn't want to play sports in college. I wanted to do something else. I love sports. I'm a football junkie. I watch it so often. I'm a psychopath when it comes to Browns football, Ohio State football, whatever. But I knew that wasn't the path for me going out of high school. So my focus, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, for those who don't know. And like I said earlier, Ohio State was essentially a religion in my state, especially where I'm at, up in Cleveland, because the Browns were so bad and the teams were so bad. The Indians were so bad. The Cavs, outside of LeBron, were so bad until LeBron won a championship after my senior year of high school. That's a whole different story. That was great. But we really focused on Ohio State football. And I wanted to go to Ohio State so badly. And that was going to be my ticket out. That was going to be where I was kind of like in high school, I wasn't that popular. I was kind of, I rode the middle between a lot of other, social groups. I was on the football team and I was, I had friends there, but I also like to read poetry and I was a really good writer in high school, a pretty good writer, really good writer in some ways. And then I did like the school news production team. I never had like a group of people. I didn't really have a lot of friends or good friends or intimate friends because I just never had a significant group that I could glom onto to say like, I'm a jock, I'm a drama club kid, I'm a glee club kid, I'm a writing kid, I'm a dork kid, I'm an anime kid, I'm whatever. Like I was never any of those things. I was kind of a melting pot of a lot of different groups in high school. And so I said, you know what, like I'm going to go to Ohio State. I'm going to plug the PlayStation out of the wall and I'm going to plug it back in and see where it goes. And so my entire high school career was focused on getting to Ohio State. That was my main focus. I'm going to get to Columbus. I'm going to go down and I'm just going to go nuts. I'm going to go crazy. Not in the sense of a partying thing, which I did in a lot of ways, but I'm going to create my future. Again, this is after my self-sufficiency kick. I'm going to work as hard. My mentality that I repeated to myself was I'm going to become bulletproof. I'm going to become so bulletproof on everything that I do that I am just going to just build myself up. I'm going to get ripped. I'm going to have the best grades. I'm going to work for I was a finance major, wanted to go into finance major. I'm going to become an investment banker. I'm going to work on Wall Street. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to buy a big plot of land and eventually start a company and do all these things and have a hot wife and a bunch of kids and all this sort of thing and be important and people are going to love me and see me and I'm going to write books and I'm going to do all these things. And so I just wanted to just totally William Tecumseh Sherman scorched earth when I went to Ohio State. And so I remember I toured Ohio State, I think it was sometime in my junior year, and we asked what the admissions criteria were, because Ohio State once was a state school. You basically could just walk in and fill out an application, they'd accept you. But now it was getting a lot more competitive. Ohio State's the third largest public university in the country now. They take in a lot of international students from China, India, Africa, a lot of other places. I had a lot of friends who were not from the United States in college. And so they said that you needed a 3.6 GPA and a 28 on your ACT, unweighted. And so I said, roger that. Okay. And so I had a 3.6 GPA and I got a 28 on my ACT. I took it twice. I got a 24 and then 28. And so I said, okay, perfect. And I was on 2 varsity sports. Weightlifting wasn't a sport, but we did it all throughout the year. I had 5 varsity letters to my name at this point. I was a vice president of National Honor Society. I ran volunteer events. I started a group with integration of special needs and normal kids in high school, or not normal kids, just non-special needs and special needs kids in high school. And I started that, and I was involved, and I was nice to people, and I checked all the boxes, and I was like, okay, I did it. Sent in my application, and I remember this is one of the many God moments of my life. I remember I sent it in October of my senior year, and I remember I went to see a movie with my brother and my dad, and I'll never forget it because it was the Jesse Owens movie. It was the Jesse Owens biopic. And Jesse Owens, for those who don't know, he was a multiple-time Olympic gold medalist. He basically gave Hitler the finger at the 1936 Olympics. He was an Ohio State grad, one of the first major African-American athletes to gain prominence in the world stage. Just a badass superhero, like everybody, like a bunch of things at Ohio State are named from. The track is, the athletic facilities, everything. He was a trailblazer for multiple reasons. And so we were going to go see the Jesse Owens biopic. And I remember, before we left, hopped in my dad's truck, there was a alert that I got on my phone from the Ohio State Admissions Department. And I said, you know what? I'm going to ride this wave. I earned it. I did it. I'm gonna go, and I'm just going to, so what I'm going to do, my plan was, the movie theater was about 15 minutes away. I'm going to drive over, and I'm going to pull up this application. My dad, the person I respected most in this world, my superhero to me, I'm going to show him, Dad, I got into Ohio State. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to see the greatest person that's ever gone to Ohio State in the history of the world, and I'm going to ride this high forever. And so I pull open the email, I log in, and it says deferred on it. And I remember what that felt like. I remember like someone shook up a can of Coke and blew it off in my frontal lobe. I just remember it was like white noise. It was like the television where it's like, old school TV where it was like white and black static. I didn't get in. I got deferred. And then I remember I couldn't move. Like, I remember we parked, and I remember my dad parking the truck, and my dad and my brother, they got out of the car, and my dad's like, hey, like let's go. Like, movie's starting in 5 minutes. And I didn't move. He's like, hey, like what's going on? Like, let's go. And I said, like, I didn't get in. He's like, what? I said, I didn't get in. And I told him the email. He's like, and he kind of like was like, he was very confused, and he was like, okay, well, it might not mean that. Let's figure it out tomorrow. Don't think about it tonight. And I'm numb. I don't remember a single scene of the movie. I don't remember how I felt about the movie. And I remember I called the admissions office, I believe the next day. And I called them, and I asked them, like, hey, I have all the criteria. I have what you wanted. I have recommendation letters. I have all this extra stuff. I have the GPA. I have the ACT score. I have everything. Like, just, is this a mistake? Like, just please tell me. And they said that I'll never forget how this poor admissions worker who had nothing to do with my application, she said that I wasn't emotionally or psychologically ready to go to Ohio State. That's what she said. And I remember it was the Coke blowing off in my frontal lobe feeling again. And I remember I couldn't believe that. So I said, words of Carmen Brazato from The Bear, okay, fuck you, watch this. And I was so angry. I still get angry thinking about it now, if you couldn't tell. I've never been that upset in my entire life. I've never been that upset. And what I did, I was already kind of an angry person. I always say, like, my spirit animal was Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender growing up. And I said, okay, I'm going to prove to everybody, to Ohio State, all the girls that don't like me, all the friends that I didn't have, everybody else, that I'm going to just stomp you out of existence. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to just wipe the floor with everyone who says I can't do something. So I remember I said I was going to go to Michigan State, and then I went to a football game, a high school football game with my late friend Dylan Franciscus and their family. Dylan went to a very prestigious Catholic high school in Ohio. We have a lot of really good high school football in Ohio, and he went to at the time, he won a state championship his senior year. They were just one of the best, if not the best team in the country. So we watched them play. I remember it was pouring out. It was pouring rain. It was they play games on Saturdays. D1 schools play games on Saturdays. I was D2. We play games on Fridays. They play games on Saturdays. And we went at the same time that Ohio State was playing Michigan State. When Michigan State, in the middle of the 2010s, was on a really good run. It was kind of like the Northwestern at the end of the 2010s. But in the mid-2010s, Michigan State, they won 2 Big Ten championships. They went to the Ohio State, or not the Ohio State, the college football playoff. They 1 year, and they were really, really good under Mark D'Antoni back in the day. And so they went there, and I remember Ohio State was playing Michigan State, and Ohio State, this is when Ezekiel Elliott, I think he only got like 13 carries, and they kicked the game-winning field goal in the shoe to win the game, and the kicker was doing this and running around and everything like that. And I remember Mr. Franciscus, Dylan's dad, told me when we listened to the end of the radio call, and they are massive Ohio State fans. They went to the national championship last year. Him and Dylan did before he passed. And I remember he just said, he looked back, he's like, hey, congratulations, Sam. And I didn't feel happy. And I should have felt happy, because this is the university that I thought screwed me. It's like they hate me because I'm white. They hate me because I'm a man. They hate me because I'm all these things, whatever. And I didn't feel happy. And I said, okay, I'm going to switch back. And I remember me and my family went to like a Red Robin, I think like a week later. And I said, Dad, like I want to switch back to Ohio State and just go to a satellite campus. And he's like, okay, you sure? And I said, okay. And I was like, okay, let's go. I went to a satellite campus. It was in Eastern Ohio. If you guys don't know anything about Eastern Ohio, that's because there's nothing really to know about Eastern Ohio. And I went out to essentially that satellite campus and went there and did all the things. And it was horrible. I lived in a community with a lot of crime, a lot of poverty, a lot of drugs. It was not good. And I remember it fueled that fire inside of me. And basically it was just like pouring gasoline on it now. I'm like, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of here. You got to get out of here. And I crushed it my first year. I remember I had like a 3.9 GPA at the end of everything. I taught myself how to do calculus. I went back and forth, and my best friend at the time, he was nice enough to let me stay with him almost every single week, and he paid for my meals. It was very kind of him to do that. And so that was very nice of him and generous of him. And I went and I slept around and I drank a lot and I puked in every single toilet seemingly at Ohio State's campus, whatever. I went to nightclubs and I did all the debaucherous things you do. I got all of it out of my system. Like, I'm away from my family, I'm away from my sister, I'm away from my parents. I'm going to just go nuts. My freshman year, I did Pong with Four Loko. All this crazy sort of stuff. I shots of Hennessy and then chased it with Four Loko, like crazy, wild stuff. Makes me nauseous just think about it now. And so, but I transferred in to Ohio State next year. I roomed on campus, and I remember I said, you know what? I'm the man. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna wipe the floor with all these people. I'm gonna destroy all these people. I'm gonna kill everybody. I'm gonna do all this kind of stuff. And I remember I walked into my first 3 exam, like my midterm week. It was like 5 weeks into the semester, my sophomore year. And walk into my exams, I'm prideful. I'm like, I don't need to study. I'm just gonna do the things that I said to do. I'm not gonna do what my professor specifically told me to do, whatever. Take a accounting exam. I had taken an engineering course, my entrepreneurship minor, which I was minoring in at the time, and my statistics course. Just to go back to statistics to start out this conversation with. And I remember I got my grades back, and I got an F, a D, and a C minus, and a 1.02 GPA to start out my big man on campus journey. And I remember I saw that I got a 48% on my first accounting exam. And I remember I was so dumbfounded. I'm like, again, this can't be correct. But my dream was like imploding right in front of me. And I remember I was living in the dorms at the time, Ohio State, because they're not a public university. They're a hedge fund and a financial institution, but that's neither here nor there. They make people live on campus for 2 hours, so I didn't have a shower to myself. Or actually, I did have a shower, but I shared it with 3 other people. We were kind of in a two-person shared bathroom dorm at the end of the hallway. But for the kids didn't have a shower in the room, they had to shower communally. And so I remember I went into one of the communal showers, and I turned the shower on because I thought I was going to burst into tears. And I called my mom, and I said, like, Mom, I'm failing out of school. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm failing out of school. And she's like, okay, like, what are you going to do about that? And I said, I don't know. And so what really, I was using, why this story matters, I think, is that I was using college, to me, as a transformation vehicle. Like, I'm going to come in, and this is my, like, butterfly, or my caterpillar cocoon turn into a butterfly moment. And it showed me, what this experience of nearly failing out showed me, that it all could be taken away due to pride. It all could be taken away. And again, what it taught me was that you have to work. Everything is up to you. It's not anybody else's fault, it's your fault. And it feeds the fire further inside of people like me. So what that taught me was like, hey, you're not special. You're not entitled to anything. Just because you've been quote-unquote wronged or whatever, that doesn't mean that you are worth your salt. You have to prove it. You have to earn it. You have to work. And I did. And so I used that, and I went to my accounting professor in contrition. I begged for mercy, and I said, what do I need to do? He told me what I need to do. Ended up working for the guy for 2 years. I still talk to him. And I based my coaching businesses after basically what he was saying. So that was very interesting. But at the end of the day, that was kind of the one thing that I really leaned on was just the I wanted that to fuel my fire. And I did. I eventually, like I said, I worked for my accounting professor. I ended up getting a really, really great GPA in college. I was in the top 1% of my business school. I won a bunch of awards, did all that sort of thing. And it was great. It was really, really awesome. It was great. And but also it didn't solve the problem. It didn't fill the hole that I was wanting to fill. And that was the big takeaway, at least for me, that, basically I felt that I couldn't win. And then when I did win, it didn't fulfill me. And that really was a shock to me because I thought it would, but it didn't. Now, story number 3. So I had always wanted to be a writer. I was a really good writer in middle school, especially there was an organization called Power of the Pen. Shout out to Mrs. Mauser, the woman who ran it in my school. She was an English teacher, and then she ran this after-school writing program for a very long time, and she still might write. I have no idea, but it was a really big deal for me because I was really into stories. I remember I would watch. I got into Star Wars at a young age. I got into Indiana Jones at a young age. I saw the Rambo movies at a young age. And my dad would always have, I always make a recurring joke that, every dad has, 10 movies they've seen, 10,000 times. They have them all in rotation. And so my dad, he would watch, Gladiator and Troy and The Patriot and all these other type of movies. And I'd see him on, and First Blood and all that type of thing. And I'd see him on the TV, and I'd get very familiar with the story arcs and the characters and all that kind of stuff. Air Force One, by the way, I think Harrison Ford's most underrated film is Air Force One. Such a great movie. And so he'd watch that all the time. And so I always loved writing and stories, and I wrote a lot when I was a kid. I would, my mom would always make this joke. She would, or not this joke, because I would take so long to explain everything because I wanted to get every detail. And she's like, Sam, tell me in 1 minute. Tell me in 1 minute the story that you want me to tell. And I couldn't do it because I was so in tune with I got to get this detail in and tell this angle and this perspective and this and that everything. And so that was the impetus for my love of story, and I love movies, and I loved kind of this one thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, it would be so cool to do that and to be a writer. And so I remember when I graduated from college and I took a sales job, I totally said I just basically said screw my finance degree. I'm not going to do that. I had an internship at a private bank in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that was very informative, and one of the biggest things in my career was that I knew I didn't want to do finance. I thought I wanted to do wealth management. I had abandoned investment banking a long time ago, but wanted to do wealth management now, and I didn't do wealth management, or didn't want to do wealth management anymore. So I remember I reached out to a guy who was a senior when I was a freshman, both in high school and in college. Grew up in my hometown, starting first-team all-state middle linebacker my senior year, but a really nice guy, and he was killing it in his job down in Austin, Texas, where I wanted to move. I wanted to move to Texas since high school, and I asked him about jobs at this company that I ended up working for, second biggest tech firm in the world, and he helped me through the interview process and got coached up, and I wanted to move down to Texas, but they said, if you want to work at the company, you got to move out to Boston. I said, fine, I'll live in Boston. I don't care. So I move out to Boston, and I have this chip on my shoulder that's become Mount Everest at this point. And I said, again, I'm going to prove it to everybody. I'm going to use this to expedite my income. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to kill everybody. I'm going to go and I'm going to make myself bulletproof, and everyone's going to look at me, and I'm going to be important and all this sort of stuff. And so I basically then, I did not have a lot of financial literacy at this point. My parents were not supporting me financially at this point. I didn't let them, to be honest with you. I think they wanted to, but I didn't let them. And I didn't know how, and it's hilarious that I was a finance major, but I didn't really know how credit cards worked. And so I put a lot of stuff on credit. I took out a bunch of different cards and a terrible decision, 20% interest, all this kind of stuff. And credit card companies are predatory, and I hope the government bans them, to be honest, or bans interest rates that are high, because that's really, I think, what needs to happen, but that's beside the point. But anyway, I get myself into massive debt by financing my moving out to Boston. Boston was so expensive. I was on a $52,000 salary plus bonus that wasn't guaranteed. So I was scrimping by. I could barely afford food. I sure as shit couldn't take, women out to a fancy place, whatever. So I said okay, got to put my head down, got to work, got to go. And I did. And so I kept working really well. And then I read, and I was reading a lot at this time. I read Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, around this time. I was reading a lot of influential books. And I remember I read Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I love Goggins. And I was like, whoa, like this guy is kind of like everything that people says he is. He's kind of nuts, but he's also like, I love like what he says and his message and all this kind of stuff. And so I remember reading Goggins' book, and I said, respectfully, like, who in the world would publish this? Like, who in the world would, like this is like he's swearing all the time and he's doing this and saying all this wild stuff. And so I look in the back and I expect to see like Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, like one of these big, publishing companies. And I don't see that. And I see a company called Scribe Media. And I'm like, who the heck is Scribe Media? I looked them up, and I just started blogging later last year. This is in mid-2020. I had started kind of my blog in October of 2019, and I went live with it in January of 2020. And so I'd been writing a big article every week, and I was doing a series called Value Economics. And I was, saying like, hey, there might be something here, whatever. And I go on and look up Scribe Media, and they say, you want to book a consultation? You want to get published? And I said, hey, I want to get published. And so I hit that, and I ended up getting connected with a gentleman named Miles Road, who I still keep in contact with. Miles is a great guy. And Miles was basically one of the publishing managers and basically my agent inside of Scribe is what I always like to call him. And so I get on this call with Miles, and I pitch him my book idea, and he loved it. And he said, like, dude, like, this is really good. I want to go ahead and publish this. Or you should go ahead and publish this. And so I remember before I got on the call with Miles and with Scribe Media, I said, I called my parents and I said, like, hey, I really might have a book idea here. I think I want to go forward with this. And my parents, who have always been very supportive of me, they said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And when Miles told me all the things that were aligned with that, I was like, okay, I'll do it. The problem was that to launch the book with everything I wanted to launch it with, that cost was over $45,000. I didn't have $45,000. I didn't have that amount of money. And so I took on a $45,000 obligation. I'm 22 years old, 23, I think at this time, 23 years old. I'm barely making any money. I'm betting on the upside. I said I'm going to get an account executive position. I'm going to close $1 million deals. I'm going to sell cloud software to everybody else, and I'm just going to bankroll this whole thing on the back end. And so stupidly, perhaps, in some ways, maybe not, but perhaps, I took on a $45,000 loan, essentially, and used that loan to put it on credit, mostly on credit cards, high interest rate credit cards that I was paying on every month. Credit score tanked, was in the toilet. And so I remember, because Miles asked me, he's like, hey, how far are you in the book? And I said, well, the book's done. And he said, what? And he said, yeah, like, is that not how authors come to you guys? And he said, no. Like most authors, like, come to us with a very unfinished product and expect us to finish everything. And I said, well, I'm ready to go now. Are you ready to go? He's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And so I sent him over the manuscript. We get going. And then so my book's going to come out on June 28th of 2022. This is late 2021. I just moved to Austin at this point, a month earlier. And I have this book coming out. They send me copies. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I said, you know what? This is going to be my rocket ship. This is going to get me out of sales. I'm going to be famous. I'm going to go on Joe Rogan. Jordan Peterson's going to call me. All these type of things. And it was my biggest dream in my entire life. I'm a published author. I'm going to get this book out. I'm going to tell my story. I'm just going to help a lot of people. And I thought the book was good. And I really tried hard. And I swung big. And I swore a ton. And I had bold claims. And I said, this is wrong. And this is right. And whatever. And so I swung big, and the book comes out. It's #1 bestseller on Amazon. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like bestseller on Amazon, all that sort of thing. But after that week, it died. It died because it lacked all the substance. I'm a 23-year-old kid doing this. About, what is that? Like 3 years ago now, 24 at this time. Yeah. So, yeah, 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And so I had a lot of entitlement. Again, that narcissism flaring up. Everyone's going to love me because I have a book. A lot of people have books. A lot of people don't get loved because of their books. A lot of people don't. So it was my biggest dream to put this out, but it put me at a disadvantage because, again, I still have that credit card debt. I took a loan out for my 401k. I can barely pay for my basic bills. I don't have money. I'm in a high-earning job, but I'm poor. It's just it's like that. And so what that taught me was that dreams are overrated. Dreams are very overrated if you don't have a plan. if you don't have substance behind your dream, it's going to screw you over. It's going to very much screw you over if you don't have a plan going forward. And so what that taught me was that if you're looking for dreams to fulfill you by themselves, you'll be disappointed. You'll be very disappointed if you're just thinking like, oh, I'm going to follow my dreams. That's why I hate the follow my dreams. You can do anything you want people, because they're liars. They're liars. It's not true. If you're looking for dreams to fulfill you, you're going to be disappointed. And you're probably going to be more than disappointed. You'll be screwed because you have nothing backstopping your own ignorance. I have nothing against dreams in a proper place, but if you take them out of that proper place, you'll end up being like me, broke in a great job with a book that I thought was good. I still think it's good, although it's not my best work for sure. I look back on it more. I'm like, oh my gosh, that probably wasn't as great as I thought it was. But it formed the foundation for my companies, my businesses, all that kind of stuff. The show, the Value Economics Show, is so because of that first book that I wrote, laying back to the first article I wrote more than 5 years ago now, almost 6 years ago. And it was, it really, like, it led me to being, again, I got what I wanted. I got the status from all the, oh my God, you're a published author, 23, what the heck is this? Making a great job, tech sales, big guy in Austin, Texas, whatever. But it screwed me over internally, and it really, really wrecked me for a very long time. And I didn't know what to do. Which leads to story number 4. So, steeping yourself in more than $45,000 in high interest rate credit card debt with no plan to get out of it is not a gamble I would follow. It's not something I would do. Although it worked out for me. I'm not saying it would work out for everybody. That's the only thing I'm saying. So if you want to take out $45,000 in 20% interest rate credit card debt, totally fine by me. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have a plan to pay that debt back. I did not, which is why everything worked out the way that it did. So it eventually got so bad, and it didn't get helped because there was a thing. I remember I closed a $3.6 million deal at my work, but this is when I know, I found out that corporations are like casinos. The house always wins at this point because they'll find every way to enrich themselves and screw over their workers if they can do that. And I'm not a Marxist, by the way. That's just kind of how corporations operate. I'm a capitalist, but that's just how they operate. I've worked in one for one of the most quote unquote successful ones for a long time. That's how they operate. So I was expecting a really massive payout, but they said like, oh yeah, we'll give it to you a year later. I'm like, well, I might not be here a year later. Like, what are you talking about? And so I plowed myself into my work. I worked really hard, but I wasn't getting paid for it. And that credit card interest kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And it took up a bigger portion of my budget, bigger. And it was like eating at my finances. I had no savings. I had no investments outside of my 401k. I had no operations and stuff. Like I was again, scrimping by. I had no money. I was totally broke, completely broke. I could pay for the base necessities, my rent, my utilities, my food, but that was about it. Like I didn't go out to bars in Austin, Texas, of all places. I didn't go out. I didn't go out to eat, hardly. I went out maybe once a week. That was it. I bought wholesale club groceries. And it got worse because, again, interest accrued on the credit card debt, growing, took away more of my budget. And eventually, I remember it got so bad at one point where I was just so poor and I was so broke that I went to the wholesale club where I got groceries. And I remember, and I didn't really buy anything fancy. I bought like big packs of eggs and chicken and a bunch of other things, or like beef or whatever. Like I wasn't buying like, filet mignon. I was buying like 73%, pure ground beef and like thinking it's a meal, I guess. And so I go and I do these, I get up to the point where I'm putting this in my cart, whatever. And I remember I ring out at the wholesale club. There's, a lot of not doing well financially people around me, and they're paying for their groceries. And I remember I scan my card, and they're like, sorry, you don't have enough for this purchase. It wasn't really that much. It was like $80, I think it was. $80 of groceries. And I said, oh, I can't eat this week. And so I put that card back in. I swiped my debit card, declined. Swiped my other credit card, declined. Other credit card, declined. And I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And so I literally could not check out of a wholesale club to buy food. So I had to do and I've done several walks of shames in other ways, if you want to catch my drift there. But this walk of shame, man, this was really painful. So I had to take my groceries, my $80 groceries, wholesale club groceries of shit food that I had, and walk my path in reverse and put them back on the shelves. I had to put groceries back on the shelves. And I said, oh boy, like this is not good. This is not good. And I had to wait to next week. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I'm like, do I take it out on the credit card? Like, what do I do? And I remember I had $80. I had like $80 in my Venmo account. And so I sent it over to my friend, shout out to Allie Carey. I sent it over to Allie, and I said, hey, Allie, could you cash this out and give me cash for this? Because I knew if she transferred it over, it was just going to go right to the deficit. I had a negative checking account balance, a negative credit balance on like 5 different cards. And I said, I need cash for this. And she's like, why do you need cash? And I didn't tell her. I lied. And I said, like, I'm just fine. I just need it for something, whatever. She gives me cash at work the next day. And I go in and I pay for my groceries. And then I have a, thing that hits next week in terms of my paycheck. And I am able to get through the rest of the month. But I mean, that story, it still makes me just so upset to this day. And why that was important is because it made me feel like less of a man. Because as a man, we're told rightly that we have to provide and we have to earn and we have to be self-sufficient when it comes to finances. And I wasn't. I was literally cashing up my Venmo account because my 5 credit cards that were all maxed out on 20% interest and my checking account, which is $1,500 in the red, I couldn't pay for everything. And at the time, my parents were asking me, like, hey, like, how's it going with this? How's it going with money? You need anything? Always said no. And I'm glad that I said no. Because I don't believe in, I remember I was talking to Abigail Schreier about this, the great author, and she said, like, are you self-sufficient? I said, what does that mean? She said, do you take money for your parents? I said, absolutely not. Take money from my parents. What are you talking about? She's like, well, a lot of people take money from their parents. I'm like, I sure as shit don't. Not me. Mm-mm. And I told my parents that. My mom literally on the other, a couple months ago, I was in a spot, and she said, like, Sam, let me send you money. I said, no, you're not going to send me money. I will never tell you. I think I literally told this to my mom. I said, I would rather chop my left arm off and sell it on eBay than take money from you. Like, no offense, like, with all the respect in the world, I am not taking your money, ever. I'm a man. I earn money. I get what I kill. I earn it. I work for it. I grind for it. So, that experience of rewalking my grocery path in the wholesale club with bad food and putting it back on the shelves because I couldn't pay for it, that drove me. I said, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of this predicament first. I got to get what's mine inside this. And I later closed more than $7 million in sales revenue in my internal company in terms of that. And then I said, I cannot depend on anybody. Like, it drove my independence, my self-sufficiency even further. I cannot depend on corporate work to feed me and to feed my family. I got to get out of here. I got to get free. I got to get independent. And basically what that taught me and still informs me is that it made me grind really hard and made me work very hard and only do things to put yourself in a position to provide. Don't chase after dreams and don't work for other people. For me, not saying that for anybody else watching or anyone else listening to this. For me, I said I would never put in a position where I'm under the thumb of a credit card company. I'm under the thumb of a corporation. I'm under the thumb of some big shot wannabe tech executive person. I'm never going to do that again because this is where it's gotten me. Broke, under their thumb, and a lot of that was my doing and my responsibility. But they didn't help matters, and they encouraged that. Credit card companies, corporations, the government, they all encourage dependence. I said, not for me. I will become independent, self-sufficient. So if you're poor, if you're broke, like I was, consider that option. Only do things that put yourself in a position to provide. Do not depend on anybody else. Not your parents, not the government, not a corporation, not a job, not a promotion. You bet on yourself. Bet on you. Bet on the upswing of you. Because to me, I found that out the hard way with having to put groceries back on the shelves. That is the only way for many that you are able to get in that position. Do it yourself. Do it yourself. Only do things that put yourself in a position to provide. Okay. So story 5, my final story. We'll wrap it up here. So I eventually got out of that scenario. I got out of corporate world. I got out of the debt. I got out of debt. I got in deeper. Actually, I took a loan out of my 401k. I did a lot of really not great stuff. But I eventually got it out. I built a lot of wealth. I'm sitting in a beautiful home now. I'm doing very well financially compared to a lot of other people. I'm really happy with where I'm at, to be honest. I'm really optimistic about my financial future. And so, basically I remember, but what I was missing was the peace element, the internal peace about myself. I didn't have that, and I wanted that. And I think that's what everyone wants. They want to find a place where they're kind of content. I call it at the end of Avengers Endgame, where Thanos is, he says he wants to look out on a grateful universe. That's kind of the way that I always put it. Maybe not shout out to Thanos, but shout out to Thanos. And so I wanted to get to that, but I didn't have that. I was looking for it in a lot of wrong places. I was looking for it in women. I was looking for it in status. I was looking for it in money, looking for it in corporate promotions, whatever that might be. But I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the peace that I really wanted. And so David Goggins has this great quote that I love repeating all the time. You can find peace, but you got to go to war first and go to war with yourself first. And I believe that's spot on, true, accurate, everything. But it's about what type of peace that you seek that you'll find. And so I remember a big part of this was that it's happened a couple of times in recent years because I'm an adult now. I remember the first time I've seen my dad cry 3 times, only 3 times. One was when my dog growing up, when my dog died, that was very sad, and my dad was really close to my dog. And I saw him cry then. He cried at my friend Dylan's funeral. He cried because my sister made him cry, which is hilarious because my sister, so Dylan was cremated and they had his ashes at the front and everyone could have a moment. And so apparently my sister, when she walked up, she said goodbye, Dylan. And that just apparently just wrecked my dad. And she did the same thing at my grandma's funeral. It was funny, but also very sweet and adorable in that way. But that wrecked my dad, and my dad cried from that. But the first time I ever saw my dad cry, the second time I ever saw my dad cry was when I was moving to Boston. We had like a going away party for me, and a lot of people that I love were there. Like a lot of my family was there, everything else. And my dad makes this kind of toast speech thing, whatever. And he says that he's proud of me, and his voice breaks and he starts to tear up a little bit. And that had never happened to me ever. And I remember I cried a lot from that when my dad said that he was proud of me. My dad said that he was proud of me his entire life, but like to see how much it meant to him that I did it and I crested the mountain for the time being. And that meant a lot, because why it was so important to me was that I finally got approval from the person that I revered and still revere to the most immense degree in my entire life. And he said it. I gave a eulogy at Dylan's funeral. He said he was really proud of me. He said he's never been more proud of me after that. That really meant a lot to me. And then I had like 3 whiskey sours to drown out the feelings of feeling proud, which is fine. I'm not against whiskey sours. I love whiskey sours, but that's beside the point. And I think most importantly, I found, Pastor Mark says all the time, you don't find God, God find you. But at the same time, I found also that my Heavenly Father was proud of me and that God found me and God saved me. God rescued me. And I discovered through, again, my friend Sam Jericho I mentioned earlier, my friend Taylor Higgins, who just got married. Shout out to her and Ron. But through Taylor, through Sam Jarek, through my small group leaders, Jenny Mosley, Katie Brooks, a lot of other things, and now through the group that I'm privileged to lead and the men that I look up to a lot from a Christian perspective, I finally felt a sense of peace, a sense of approval from everything else, from my dad, from my God, from everything. And I think the important thing of all of this is what it taught me was that peace is possible. And I never thought that it was. I always thought that I was meant to toil and struggle and suffer and nothing was ever going to happen. And I was always just going to be in this constant hamster wheel, this constant fight, this constant thing. And at that moment, those moments, I should say, I felt something kind of tell me, it's like, hey, buddy, you don't have to fight anymore. You can put your fist down. You can relax. You can breathe. You can settle in. Put the weapon down. Put your fist down. Sit back in a chair. Kick your feet up and watch, and Thanos point again, watch the sunset in a grateful universe. And that meant a lot to me because it showed me that self-sufficiency, the thing I had built my entire life on, was just BS at the end of the day. Because you can't get there by yourself. You need other people to help you. And you should be self-sufficient. You should work outrageously hard, so hard that you want to puke. I do that all the time. But at the end of the day, you need to come to terms with what you do and how you conduct yourself in the world. And that was that moment for me. And that was really important. So the feeling of peace, man, that's I've been feeling it a lot more recently. I've gotten to some bad patterns of striving and self-sufficiency, but I'm feeling it more recently, and I really like it. It really feels good. It feels good. And I think that's important for everyone to feel. And I really hope everyone who watches this gets to a point where they can feel that. So, yeah, feels good. Thanks for watching, everyone. Own the day, open your mind. I'll see you guys next week.